This lesson is concerning solving systems of equations. In this one, we're going to do the method called elimination, sometimes called linear combination. So we've already done graphing to solve a system of linear equations. We've also done substitution for solving a system of linear equations. This third method will give us an extra method in our toolbox in order to solve a system. So first of all, when we do this, we want to talk about the steps. The first step is to line the equation up properly. So what this means is, let me show you with these different equations. This first system of equations is lined up. The x's are lined up, the y's are lined up, the equal signs are lined up, and the numbers are lined up. The second example that we'll do, notice that the x's are lined up, but then the equals aren't lined up, the y's aren't lined up, the numbers aren't lined up. We have to get it in the proper order in order to solve the system using this method. So be aware that this is a critical first step. Line it up properly. Okay, so you want to, I'll put in parentheses here, line up the x's, the y's, the equal sign. So on both of them you want to have the equal sign lined up, and also the numbers. So that's what it means to line them up properly. Get them in an order where it looks like this: x's, y's, equals, and numbers are lined up. Second step, what we want to do is get, like here, see that the y's are opposites? Negative 3y, positive 3y, they're opposites. So you want to go ahead and multiply one of the equations to get opposites. You might have to multiply both. Okay, today we won't see that as an example, but there will be times you got to multiply both equations. Multiply one equation or both equations to get opposites. See, what this method's called elimination, because you notice that these two will eliminate each other because they're opposites. All right, then once you do that, you want to also make sure you solve for what you get when you do that. Actually, let's do that on the next step. So we'll involve that in the next step. Here, you next want to, since you've got them lined up in opposites, you're going to add straight down. Okay, that's what is unusual. So add straight down and solve. And then the fourth step is you want to then go back to the method of substitution to find the other variable. Use substitution to find the other variable. All right, those are our steps. You'll get used to this kind of process with these. So if you look at this one, this already has steps 1 and 2 done. They're lined up, x's lined up, y's and numbers and the equal signs. Now, if I draw a line under this on both sides of the equals, I can do the same thing I got to do to both sides of the equation. That's our rule for algebra. I'm going to add straight down. So 4x plus 2x is 6x. Negative 3y plus 3y is no more y's, so those are gone. Negative 22 plus 16 gives me negative 6. Now I can solve this equation. Divide both sides by 6. Make sure you do it on both sides of the equation, so you get x equal to negative 1. Now I go back to substitution to solve this equation. So I'm going to take that negative 1 and substitute it into either equation. So let's go ahead and put it into the, I'll do it in the second equation. So 2 times negative 1 plus 3y equals 16. Negative 2 plus 3y equals 16. Add 2 to both sides, 3y equals 18. Divide both sides by 3, and I get y equal to 6. So my solution will be this x and that y together, negative 1 comma 6. For an answer. All right, let's try the next one. Now this next one doesn't have any of the steps completed yet, so we want to follow all 4 steps for this. So notice that on this one, we don't even have the x's, y's, and equal sign lined up. So what I'm going to do first is get the x's and y's on the left side of the equation. So I'm going to leave this equation alone. 8x minus 10y equals negative 24. I'm going to leave the x's and y's on the left side, the number on the right. That's the typical way we do it. And I'm going to get this 5y on the other side with the 6x. What I have to do is I have to subtract 5y from both sides to make that happen. So notice if I subtract 5y from this side, I get just the number, negative 8. And if I subtract 5y from here, I get 6x minus 5y equals that negative 8. Now I've got the x's lined up, the y's lined up, the equal signs lined up, and the numbers lined up. So the next step will be to get them to be opposites. That's step 2. Well, I could get the x's to be opposites by going to 24. I can multiply the top equation by 4 and the bottom equation by negative 3. So you can do that, multiply both equations if you want to, but a simpler solution is if I multiply that top equation by negative 2, this will become a 10y. That'll be the opposite of the negative 10y. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply this equation by negative 2, multiply every term by negative 2, because what you do to one side of the equation you have to do to the other. Negative 2 times 6x is negative 12x. Negative 2 times negative 5y is plus 10y. And then negative 2 times negative 8 is positive 16. This second equation I'm just going to list as is. I don't need to multiply it by anything because the y's will be opposite if I leave it alone. So now I've got an equation where the x's, the y's, the equals, and the numbers are all lined up, and then the y's are opposites. So let's add straight down. So when I add down, I get negative 4x. No more y's when I add straight down. And here, 16 plus negative 24 gives me a negative 8. Okay, now for this, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 4. And I get x equal to positive 2. So I found my x. Remember, the next step is then the last step, step 4, is to go back and substitute to get the other variable. I could choose either equation. I'm going to go ahead and choose, in this case, I'll do the second equation here. Okay, it's really a choice, but here, since x is by itself, I'm going to do this one since the y is over here. So it's 8 times 2 minus 10y equals negative 24. So substitute it in there. Now let's go ahead and solve. 16 minus 10y equals negative 24. Subtract 16 from both sides, and I get negative 10y here. Numbers are gone, negative 40. Negative 24 minus 16 is negative 40. Now divide by negative 10, and I get y equal to 4. So my answer is x equals 2 and y equals 4 for a solution. You can check that out in the equations if you'd like to see that that works. All right, let's do our last example here. This example, notice that again, x's and y's are not lined up, so what I want to do, this one has the x's and y's on the left side, so I'm going to leave it alone. So 4x minus 18y equals 68. This equation, I'm going to go ahead and subtract x from both sides. in order to get the x on the other side. And since I want the x's to line up, I'm going to write the negative x first, the opposite of x first. So I'll have opposite of x, and then I'll have plus the 3y. Notice the 3 is positive, so the x gets the opposite, the 3y is a positive there, and then I have a negative 14 on the other side. So x's are lined up, y's are lined up, equal signs and numbers. Now, excuse me. Now I want to go ahead and get one of them to be opposites. I've got a choice here. I could multiply this by 6 and I'd have negative 18y and 18y. Or I could multiply this by 4. Really, it's a choice. Either one will give the exact same answer. Just to show that you can eliminate the x's as well, I'm going to multiply by 4. So this one will get the x's to be opposite. So 4x minus 18y equals 68. Here I'll have negative 4x plus, got to multiply the 4 times the 3y, 12y equals 4 times negative 14 is equal to, let's see, that would be 16, negative 56. Now once I have the x's lined up, the y's lined up, the equal signs lined up, and the numbers lined up, let's go ahead and add straight down. No more x's. Negative 18y plus 12y gives me negative 6y. 68 plus the negative 56 will give me a positive 12. Now when I take that and divide both sides by negative 6, I solve for y. So I get y equal to negative 2 for an answer. Now once you have that y, we've got to go back and substitute in to get the x. I'm going to go into the first equation here. So 4x minus 18 times that negative 2, substituted in, equals 68. 4x, this will be minus 18 times negative 2 is plus 36, equals 68. Subtract 36 from both sides. We'll do it to both sides of your equation, both sides of the equal sign. So you get a 4x left here because the 36's are gone. 68 minus 36, that gives me a 32. And I want to divide both sides by 4, and so I get x equal to 8. So my answer will be 8 for x and negative 2 for y. So we now have 3 methods for solving systems of equations. We can graph them to see where they intersect, or if they don't intersect, if they're parallel, that's no solution, or if they are the same line, the entire line's a solution. We also have substitution that we use to solve, and then we have a new method now, elimination, also called linear combination, that will help us solve equations for systems of equations.